Welcome, everyone, to our next session of a Spiritual Beings Virtual Summit. And we have another incredible session for you. And for me, a very special one. I get to sit and have a conversation with one of our artist ambassadors, Treg. Treg, I am so glad you could join us here today for this session. Thank you so much.
Well, Jody, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it. Of course, I get a little bit nervous with this kind of stuff. I'd rather be doing the work than talking about it.
Yes.
So it's really, this is your format, not mine.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I really appreciate that. And you doing this for us. And, with spiritual beings, we made a very conscious decision very early on, which isn't normal, I guess. The way that different collections have been set up in the past, but for me to have a strong base of artist ambassadors was really important. And when I thought about who that would be and who would be suited into that role, you obviously came into my mind. Treg and I have been friends for a long time now. One of the very first families, him and his wife Lily and beautiful daughter Emma, one of the first families we met when we came into New York City in 2013 and didn't know anyone to not even write an emergency contact on our school form. And Treg's smiling face was welcomed at the school drop-off of a morning. And really, for me, the more I got to know Treg and the more I got to know Luli and their family, the more I just realized what incredible people they are and the depth and just what they carry. And so for me, Treg is an artist who is a deeply spiritual person. And as an ambassador for spiritual beings, he embodies so much of what my heart and what my hope for our community would carry, and would know the posture of being able to be very authentically, deeply who he is, and to have that creative spirit within him, and to sit in the business world as well as sit in a creative space, as well as be part in within culture and family and all that he does and embodies, and just the story that has led to this point. And I think that, Treg, I would love for our community to meet you. I know they're going to fall in love with you. We have an amazing video that we will be releasing, and you will see a very small glimpse of Treg and be introduced to Treg within our community and our ecosystem. A little bit of alpha. There's just some very special things that are going to be coming out, and I know that Treg is going to be a face and a part of the spiritual beings family that we all really love and are excited to be with. But I wanted to take this opportunity just to kind of dive into that whole story and Treg's journey, because it is one that I don't know anyone who has heard Treg's story who isn't completely fascinated just by the way that he has navigated and the way that he has outworked and lived out who he has been created to be, and what it is that he's doing. So Treg, let's go right back. I want you to start from when you were a young boy and you started to first think about and start first realizing this artistic nature within you and what you were creating. What did that look like even from a very young age?
Well, it's funny when you're young, it's as I was even thinking about talking to you, I was thinking about when I was young, you're not really thinking about that this is going to be your life or you're a part of your career or a path that you're on. But I do remember that it just at like maybe 9 years old, it was just a tough season for our family because my dad was related to the oil business. And it's like, this was like in 1971, 72, and that oil crisis hit. And so for us, that Christmas was going to be a tough one because I knew that we were not going to have our typical, everything that you wanted was going to be under the Christmas tree. And so that season, I just remember thinking to myself, I always liked to doodle, and I had always colored, and I liked being creative with, just materials. But for some reason that season, I thought to myself, if I could draw it, I would be happy enough. If it was exactly the way that I saw it, it would be as if I had it. So really my challenge to my little self was just do your best. And I remember I would sit there, and I think as little kids, you scribble something in a couple of minutes and you're happy and you move on. I would literally sit there for hours working on these little drawings. And when I would finish one, I was so satisfied with it that I truly was happy enough with the drawing that I didn't need the gift. And so that was a weird way of kind of embracing the artwork in a different way than most kids do. And I think then as you go through the seasons of early life, just things happen in your life. And for me, there was a season of bullying that for me drove me again to a place where I would uh, internalize. And I think my expression was just draw again or just create
Mm.
again. And that became like grade school and middle school and into high school, you not knowing how to deal with it. And, when, I think back then you don't have the labels, you don't have the counseling, you don't have the stuff that's available today. So my place where I learned how to deal with stuff was through my artwork. I didn't really express myself in like the negatives in the artwork, but it really became a place of comfort, And so I would
Right.
retreat to my work and enjoy just doing work. And that became something where in a small town in Wyoming, I was just super prolific. I mean, I think by high school, I created so much work that even just doing like a statewide art symposium, I would clean up more than any town in the whole state of Wyoming, just
Wow.
because I just did so much work. And really, I got pretty good at it at an early age.
Mhm. Yeah, that's amazing because it fascinates me to see how in this situation of what came out of that situation. Like there was a hardship and there was a circumstance in your life that was something that you would never have wanted to ever happen. And yet out of that time came that initial idea of I'm going to draw the gifts that I wish I had under the tree. And that sense of satisfaction within that then it was like it was almost as you said it was almost like it was better than the actual gift because it was something that you had created and I love that in those hard times the beauty that can come out of that and I think that for
Yeah.
me that is super inspiring because it helps me to understand that when we are in hard times it's often not ideal times where we're making some of the best work and don't discount those hard times as being write-offs and like I can't do anything
Yeah.
because it is yeah
No, and even
that
I was just thinking, as you said that, as I transitioned later in life, and it's a long story that maybe we'll touch on some of it, but there was a point where I left what I was doing as an artist because, in the going from high school into young adulthood, I ultimately did become successful in Los Angeles. And so I was working, but then moving to New
amazing.
York, speeding, forward to that point, there was just the coming into working at a place like Times Square Church and putting your art career on hold, moving into a whole nother realm of work altogether. What I have learned is that creative problem solving, I took the same skills that I used in the artwork and everything I learned in being creative, and I translated it into how do you deal with people, how do you deal with complex situations with, whether it's like working in projects around the world. I was able to take a lot of what I learned as an artist and apply it in a way to helping people, helping projects, growing things. But ultimately, it's all creative problem solving, which is what painting was to me. That's what any of the artwork,
Amazing.
even as a young kid, I think what I was doing is I was for myself problem solving. Using
Hmm.
art as a way to deal with with issues or whatever. And
Yeah, yeah,
even when you're dealing with it from a money perspective, you're
yeah,
you're actually solving a problem of like, no, I need to sell something to be able to pay a bill or to pay rent or whatever. So
yeah.
I kind of always have used artwork that way.
Yeah, yeah, which is incredible. And I love that. as you're saying, it ties into that in a way that it is kind of not conventional in a way that I would normally think about, oh, creativity and spirituality. And you think about making the artwork, but not, as you're saying, about how that comes about, the situation that it's made in, what problems it can then solve, and how that ministers to within you, within that spiritual side of you, that it was almost, I imagine, cathartic as a young boy to sit and to perfect those drawings. It was almost like that spiritual experience of having disappointment and yet channeling it into in this way.
Yeah. And I do think that, that's what that artwork became. It was always, you were doing something, for me, I was doing something that I wanted for myself.
Mm,
Even though I would learn to sell it or I would learn to turn it into a business, I was very quick to separate the personal and why I was doing it for myself versus the business of like, what are you going to do with this now that you have it?
okay.
Very clear difference to me between those two things. And I think even now I still try to understand myself, and I think as I've grown older in my relationship with God, there's things that he has taught me through the process of even work. I mean, just as an example, I remember after I accepted the Lord and I started living my life in a completely different way, because of how my relationship changed with God. It was one of those things that only God would know, is that I had never finished a painting ever. I had sold tons of
Well,
artwork, but there was an element of it that I knew that the buyer is only buying what they see. So they didn't know they had no idea. For me, that the fear of rejection of, if I finished something and nobody wanted it, then where would I be? So if I
yeah.
actually left a painting just slightly unfinished to a point where it was good enough to represent a finished painting, but I already knew what I had kind of intended it to be, that was one of the big challenges that God gave me, I think the year after, or maybe the year and a half after I came to know the Lord. One of the challenges was he said, no, I want you to finish everything that you
Mm,
started. And so at that point, I was working for John Kluge, and I was doing like 36 different paintings for him. And each one of them was something that I had to uh, take the challenge to myself. They were getting what they wanted. They just had a specific list of things that they were looking for, for him. But the challenge for me was, will I actually finish this stuff? And so I
mm,
did. Each painting, I really did what I considered my finished work. And the irony is, I didn't document it. And when I went to go photograph it in the space where it was, I didn't take a picture. So I have no I have no record really of anything that I considered finished work, which for me will always be sad, because I would love to look back on those and see what I saw as what I was considering finished. But for
yeah.
me personally, the satisfaction of knowing from God's perspective, he knew that I had done what he had asked me to do. I finished everything for the first time,
Mm,
and I guess that's a part of life for me anyways, is like, will I finish what God's asked me to do? Will I finish what's in front of me to take care of?
yeah. Yeah. Wow. And what a huge part of our spirituality that is to have those points where we get refined and we get really kind of from the inside out. I want to just go back for a second. So you were a young boy, and this kind of became a practice. It became then more than that. As you said, you were at art symposiums, you were winning all these things. So you went from there. How did you end up in LA as a successful artist at that point? What did that journey look like? And what was that LA scene like? I'd love to hear what that
Well,
was like for you.
I had gone to Pepperdine because it was the closest beach school I could find that was a good school, and ultimately left quickly because I realized when I found myself teaching the watercolor class, I thought, that what's the point of paying for this if I'm going to be a teacher? So
Yeah.
I actually just left school and just started working and realizing like, no, if I'm going to really do something here, I need to just get on the stick and start selling. And so it was, it's like any young artist. I was working at a restaurant and I was doing jobs like that, but at the same time, really pushing, selling artwork. And I just became my own dealer in a sense and created these, whether it was a show that I was doing or whatever, I found a way to do the business. And, but because of the relationships I had and the connections I had from school, I realized early on that, money was there was a certain way that people lived with money. And if you could figure out how to manage those relationships, I understood what they wanted. They wanted the artist and the artist mentality and the artist look and the concept of what an artist was. So I realized just be the artist, but be smart enough to do the business, and so
Yeah.
I learned early on how to sell work for myself and to not get attached to it, but just to say to myself, no, there's a financial end to this. And so in those several years of just like living in Los Angeles, I really worked at networking relationships and ultimately went into a gallery there in Los Angeles. And I lasted about a year because what I couldn't stand was I hated the 60-40 split. 60% went to the gallery and 40% went to the artist. And I had been so used to the 100% going to me that I, again, left the gallery and the dealer world. And I went back into just private sales. And I ended up like, in that season, I was enjoying the business and enjoying the lifestyle and enjoying what comes with that. But ultimately, I think there was one show that I did that I would just, I would put together my own events. And I had an event that night that in some circles, it was considered one of those, a great place to be in Los Angeles that night, because it was a super fun party. And it was a really fun night, and I sold a ton of work. But ultimately in that night was also the beginning of the end of that season of my life, as I found myself, going home, having what I considered was a super successful night. And but I went home and it must have been like 3:00 in the morning. And as I was, had parked my car and I was walking to my place, I was like, wow, I am so empty in this. This is there's so nothing. I thought I would feel so much better. And I thought I would be so much more excited, but I had already realized like money only gets you things.
Yeah.
It doesn't really do what you think it's going to do for you. And so when you have it and you're dealing with this and you're really looking for some deeper satisfaction, which I think is what I instinctively was doing, but didn't even know to call it that. I mean, it was really, there was a spiritual tug, but to me, I had already realized, like, for instance, I had grown up in a Christian home, so Jesus was not an issue to me. I didn't want to know Jesus personally. I had no problem with Jesus personally. He could do whatever he wanted to do. He could be the Son of God, and everybody else could love that. And if you needed that, in my terms, I would have said, if you need that crutch, use it. Because I saw Jesus as a crutch for people. I never saw anything about spiritual life that would have been applicable to me. So for me, I had really pushed everything spiritual aside in my thinking. Really what I was doing was pushing Jesus aside, because I had no problems going to A Course in Miracles with Marianne Williamson. I had no problems with self-realization. I had no problems with anything else that would try to satisfy the spiritual part of me. And that's where like the drive to work more, or the drive to do more with my work, was something that was there, I think, to try to satisfy that deeper longing that we all have. There is a part of us that, like with what spiritual beings is, all of us have a spiritual need.
Yeah.
And to me, as you want that spiritual need to be met, you will look for a million different things.
Yeah.
And most of us just want to reject the idea that Jesus, or that somehow a relationship with God is going to satisfy that. And I think that moment when I was walking home really was a turning point in my head. I didn't realize it. God had to allow my life to be crumbled in front of me, because at that point
Mm.
I couldn't get my workout to deliver it to the people that I sold it to. I also was creating alternate sales so that if it didn't sell on night one, or as soon as I brought it out of the space, I would sell it at a discount to somebody else. So I had my levels of sales all set up and ready. I couldn't get the workout from this
Wow.
guy, so God was really squeezing my world so that it would come to the point where I ultimately realized there was nothing I could do, and I was stuck, and I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know how to deal with anything. But in your life, even with my creative life, there's only so much of that you can handle, where you finally
Mm.
will turn to somewhere. And
Yes.
I mean, even with self-realization, I had it was that speak and it'll be so thing. I think it's kind of like, I think there was a movie that was something about that recently, and I had spoken out of my mouth that I can't fail.
Mm.
And even when I said that, it felt like rocks in my mouth, and it was weird to say. I mean, it sounds so stupid to hear myself even say that, but literally I remember thinking, wow, I wish I hadn't said those words, because they really feel like rocks in my mouth.
Wow.
and
I
and
mean,
having, and then to turn around and see what happened afterwards, I was like, no, this is tough.
yeah. And I think like that, I can just picture that scene. It's almost like I'm in La La Land, or, the movie. Like, I can just picture that scene, you walking
Yes,
back to your car, you've had this beautiful, amazing LA
so
night, and
true.
it's done all this artwork, and yet that empty feeling. And on like,
Yeah,
I have felt that. I will guarantee that so many of us have felt that feeling, and it brings you to a defining point of talking in a different session about, sharing about those moments where you just go, okay, and there's just this surrender and this release. And I guess for you, it was the I can't fail, and it's letting out what we're holding on so tightly to be. And I love that, because for me, that feels not only spiritual, but it feels there's a sense of our creativity coming out, because we're allowing ourselves to
yeah.
not be so bound in the way it has to be or it has to look.
Well, and that's exactly like what I think I realized at 31, when I finally sat there alone in my living room and looking at my life and realizing my whole goal, I had just wanted to be happy. I wasn't a drug addict. I had no, on the outside, people looked at my life and thought it was perfect. Everybody thought I was like a golden example of like how everything worked for somebody. I was the only one that knew that it was not like that on the inside. And so sitting there, I was like, the concept of even how do you let your life go? How do you let go of who you are? And I felt like God was challenging me in that moment, like, what is it that you're so afraid of? And I was like, no, what I'm afraid of is, I know that I'm the sum total of all the choices that I've made up until this point. I know that. I may not like it, but I know how I got here, and I know who I am. What scares me more than that is, who do you think I am? Because to me, that was way scarier. The unknown. Who's the Treg that God actually intended? And how do you manage this relationship with someone you can't see, or someone you can't really, in my mind, you really couldn't talk to? I had the concept of a relationship with God was all based in like late 60s and early 70s Sunday school, flannel graph pictures. Everything was so religious to me. There was nothing real about a relationship with God. And what I learned that day when I finally said, you know what, I don't necessarily understand this, but I'll try it. I'm scared of this, but I'll
Hmm.
step into it. My concern was, I've got to be fully honest. And that's why I had to say to what I understood as God in this moment was like, I don't love the idea of prayer. I don't get it. I don't like the Bible. I've read it. I don't have time for this. Anyways, because the ideas of the commitments of what people had told me of relationship with God was like, and who Jesus was, totally different to me than what my relationship with God is like today. And from the
Mm.
moment that I turned my life over and actually said, you know what, you can have it, whatever that means, you can have it.
Mm.
And I realized
Mm.
that's what was happening, was the surrender of just being able to let go and say, I
Mm.
don't have answers for this, but I'm willing to go on this journey together. It's That's why they call it a personal relationship. It's yours.
Yeah.
And for me,
Yeah,
that
that's
was what I
it.
needed. I needed the personal relationship with Jesus. I needed it to be on the terms where I could talk about it. I could talk about what I didn't like. I could talk about what I didn't understand. I could say, I don't get any of this stuff. I don't get what the Holy Spirit means. I don't get it. But God would patiently walk me through. God totally understood that I didn't like the Bible and
Yeah.
taught me how to like it and
Yeah.
taught me how to read it. But I didn't get it from other people, and that was, I think, where
Mm.
the personal part came in. Eventually, of course, there's people that influence your life, and you do find, ways, and God leads you to things that actually draw you in. And that's just like even with my career, journeying through the process. That's how I ended up letting go, because God rebuilt my career as an artist.
Yes.
He brought
Yes.
it all back.
Yes, let's go. So hang on, you've had this night, you've had this existential crisis in a way. You've kind of come to the end of yourself. What happens there? What happens at that part of the story?
Well, in that part of the story, what happens is, believe it or not, and it was tied back to a spiritual application. I
Hmm.
couldn't understand the concept of tithing. I know this sounds strange, but the idea of giving your money to a church to me was ridiculous. I couldn't get it. As I But I ended up finding out that I only had $20 left to my name. And I felt this whisper inside saying, you've got $20 left. What is wrong with giving $2 away?
Mm.
And I was like, you know what? You're right. I cannot buy anything more with $18 than I can with 20. Take the $2. You've made your point. Go on. That was the beginning of my career change.
Wow.
Suddenly, once I finally let go of this control of money that I had, and I allowed God to come in and show me a principle, He said, test me in this. And I did. I tested him in it. And let me tell you something, God proved faithful. I suddenly started selling again. I ended up, and through another whole series of other God applications, I find myself in New York, but I was working like crazy. I mean, I had people like Jeffrey Bean doing work for him. I had, worked with the Ferragamo people. I had done, by the time I was working in Los Angeles, I spent a year with this artist, Gil Garfield, and we were working in Soho together. I was working for him, but it started working on my own commission work. I think I must have had like a year's worth of commission work with all these people, Bear Stearns people, like major clients. I don't know how these people found me. I don't know where these clients came from, but God had resurrected this career for me, and I was having a ball. I had a studio like on my space that I worked from was at the corner of Broadway and 63rd, where there's a Starbucks and a Duane Reade right there. That corner right at Lincoln Center, was my space where I worked from.
Wow.
So God had given me all this, and I knew it, and that was, to me, part of it was, to me, a lot to deal with, that willing to give away the $2. Sounds crazy, but that's
Wow.
how it started.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. And so you came from LA into New
Came from
York.
Los Angeles to New York, and that was kind of like, and um, again, do you want another story?
Yes.
No, because
Yes.
I had been reading about this story of the rich young ruler, and that was one of those stories where, just as I had read it that night, and the rich young ruler, it's like he's asking Jesus what he can do to follow him, and Jesus says, well, he says, I've done everything there is, and Jesus says, well, then just do this, give it, sell everything you have and follow me. It's that simple. And I'm like, oh, what a great story. I'm like, what? Too bad the guy didn't follow him. And so I'm just like, as I lay down to go to bed, I'm like laying there, and God said to me, he goes, well, what's stopping you? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, no, what's stopping you from following me wherever I want you to go? And I suddenly looked around my place, and I was like, no, it's all this stuff that I have.
Mm.
And I was like, no, if this is the challenge you're giving me, this is tough, but let's see what happens. The next morning, I took everything. I had a grand piano, I had furniture, I had tons of stuff. I put it all on the sidewalk for anybody that wanted to take it. They could take anything. And that night I went to bed. I had to go to the Target and buy an eggshell crate to sleep on. But that was the beginning where I finally was free from my things, to be able to then, what God gave me was, He gave me the opportunity then to move to New York. So I just moved to New York, but with nothing but a clean slate. Because at that, in Los Angeles, I realized I was the center of the world for myself. Everything in my life was whirling around me, even God. And I had told God, I said, I know I don't want to be like this, but I can't help it. This is just the way that I am here. And so when I came to New York, the guy was like, no, this is your chance to let me be the center and you can revolve around me. And so that is how New York became a new start for me, with God at the center. And that's where, like, me being able to ebb and flow with whatever he's looking for, that's where, whether I'm doing artwork or whether I'm working in the church, it doesn't matter to me. It's all part of what is God's plan for me and how is he moving me forward.
Incredible. Oh my gosh. And so it's just amazing the way that the rhythm and just the nuances of the story have taken you through so many personal situations and so many personal discoveries of yourself
Yeah.
and of who you are, and then your art just flows out of that.
Yeah.
So is that I know that you had then a big pause in terms of your art. So what did that feel like when you put that down, because it had been so much a part of your story? What was that
Well,
like for you?
the way that it happened was, it wasn't an intentional pause. It was like, what I had done was, I was just thankful, like that I had met a bunch of people here in New York that were Christians and professionals. And I had kind of had this sad idea that most Christians were former drug addicts or people with life controlling issues that they needed, like I said, the crutch, which as I was standing there, I was thanking God for these people. I was thanking God for the opportunities. And I said, the only thing I really still control is my career, meaning controlling it from the fact that I was still doing it. And I said, but if you really want that, you can have it too. Thinking I was going to do a painting for the church or Pastor Dave or anybody, I just thought it was going to be a gift that I would donate. That was where the next day I had another deal with the Kluge team, and I was supposed to paint for 2 years, just going around the world to his properties. And it was a great opportunity to me. I was super excited about it because I wanted that contract. And that morning I got a call, and that was where the maintenance team here at Times Square Church, they were calling me, asking me, super excited, like, oh, Treg, there's a job as a janitor here. We want you to take it. I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't know if I could do that. But I hung up the phone, and I had talked to my dad, who, meant well, but kind of gave me advice to stay in the field I was in. But then God was actually behind in my head whispering, like, wait, why did you call him? Because I was the one you were talking to. And when I turned around, I said, what did you mean? And he says, no, I want to know, what did you mean? Did you mean I could really have your career?
Whoa.
And I was suddenly like realizing what I had said. And the challenge for me was, as I thought about it, as I felt the challenge, I knew God would not be disappointed if I took the career, because he knew that I knew he had blessed me with it anyways. And it was about that, but he was just challenging me. It was like, did you mean what you said? And for me, it was the idea that God had been a God of integrity to me. There had been no part of what God had told me that he didn't do, or anything that I need. Everything was truth from God to me. And so my thing back to him was, I said, well, you have been a God of integrity. And I said, ultimately, I just want to be a man of integrity. I just want my word to be my word. And if that's what I said, even if I may have thought I meant something else, I said, I really just want to honor my own word. And I said, and so if that's what this is about, then I'll take the janitor's job, if that's what you're asking me for. And you're taking it, if you're going to take my career like that, I'll do it. So I called the people with the Kluge thing. I said, I'm not signing the deal. I said, I'm not coming. I'm not even coming in. I'm just going to skip it. And I called the guy at the maintenance office back, and I said, when do you kind of want me to start this? Because I had all this commission work that I was still working on. And they were like, we need you to start on Monday. And I'm like, you got to be kidding. So that was the beginning of my life, from the artist to the janitor.
Whoa.
No, so then, like 27 years later, ultimately I had been at Times Square Church for a long season. But that's, like I was saying earlier, learning the creative process. And there was a time in the middle of all that where God had to help me see that what I really was doing was a collaborative project with him. And when there was a supernatural moment where I felt like God lifted me out of my seat to show me something from his creative perspective, which is something I could probably never explain well enough to understand, for anybody else to understand what I felt in that moment. But it was really being with the creator of the universe, who weaves everything together anyways, and you're just a part of that. And then suddenly coming back into your seat and the limitations of the tools we've been given to work with, the paintbrushes or the pencils or whatever, suddenly everything seemed so limiting that I was actually happier doing what I was doing and felt actually more creative in that respect than I ever felt, or as didn't feel as satisfied with the artwork part. But now I'm coming back into this season where there's been this explosion of like ideas again. And so painting again, and it's digital photography, or like it's collages. I mean, so the work is just in me now to come out. And that to me is, again, I feel like God is in that, not necessarily me controlling that. It's just his thing, you know? So I'm just trying to follow that leading.
And that is an exciting place. I mean, oh my gosh, for all of us, we get to enjoy the incredible work that's, you know, coming out in this season, and the process that you have gone through personally as an artist, as a spiritual being, to now be in this season of your life, and the things that you are producing now. It's just incredible. And I think that your story of character, your story of integrity is just so profoundly beautiful. And I think that it is so inspiring, because the situations will be different for all of us, but to not sell out, on the thing that we know that's the hardest thing to do. And it's the thing that often makes no sense, but it's the very thing that unless we do it, we won't be fully, alive in our spirit and alive in ourselves, and the way that things all seem to kind of working then together to bring us to a point that's even far greater and richer than we could have ever imagined. And your story is so much a part of that. I am so excited for this next season. I mean, you've had such an amazing adventures to this point. And even then, I'm still thinking the best we haven't even seen yet, because of the collective of all that it is within you. And so that is my hope, and that is my delight to have you as our ambassador, is that no matter what that may look like for us personally and for our community, that however that translate in our own stories, that we would have the courage and we would have that character and integrity to go after what we know within us is that next step to take. And I think that this whole new world of Web3, it is like the Wild West. It is a new frontier. There are so many opportunities. And as you said, you know, we are often that a collective of all the choices that we've made. But may these paths that are going to be forged now, may it be done in a way that's done out of that place of a deep understanding of, at a spiritual level, that this is the step that I need to take in order to bring this vision to fruition. So Treg, what an absolute joy and honor to have you to sit with us and to share. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your transparency, for being real, and just letting us see some more of who it is, and really understanding more of your heart, because your work is just beautiful, and that's so easy to see. And I love that we're starting to see and for people to get to know more of you. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. It was fun.
We love that you are part of Spiritual Beings. What is the one thing that makes you the most excited about Spiritual Beings and being part of this community?
Oh, for sure. It's been the people I've been meeting. I mean, to realize, you know, it's just, that has been such an exciting part, because in the world that I've been in, it's been it's a different type of people. And so to be back with
Mm,
artists again, meeting people like this, people with, and also just to see the whole spiritual aspect of what you're doing, you'd suddenly feel like you have a tribe that's able to,
yeah.
you're able to be a part of something else that other people are doing. And it just, that's exciting to me. And it's all new for me. So there's a lot of what we're doing that I have, as the conventional artwork that I have always done, suddenly you see that there's no limits, and so the ideas you're gleaning from other people, you're learning from, new things all the time. So to me, that's one of the most exciting things about what you're doing and what we're a part
Amazing. Amazing. We love it. Well, we are Spiritual Being Family. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in and for, sitting with us and having our conversation with Treg. And I know that you would be encouraged and inspired. And I invite you to go and just really just process and think about what that means for you and for what your next steps may be and some of the decisions that you're yet to make. So we will see you all again very soon. Bye, Treg. Have an
all
amazing
right.
rest